The weapons are silent, the truce is holding, and it was Pakistan that brought it about. Both nations have taken a step back from the brink. For a fleeting moment, the official storytellers on both sides are spinning it as a victory. But before you buy into that narrative, before you let the comfort of a ceasefire obscure the question that truly counts, you must consider one figure. Not the number of jets lost, not the body count, not the price of oil. One figure that concerns every American who's paid taxes in the last 10 years, upwards of $200 billion. This is the minimum conservative calculation of what the United States poured into the weeks between the initial attack and the truce that Pakistan helped broker in Islamabad. $200 billion of American taxpayer funds expended in a war that concluded with not one stated goal met, not one Iranian nuclear site permanently taken offline, and not one durable change to the regional power dynamic that could justify the price of admission. The truce didn't conclude the war on America's terms. It ended it on the only terms left after the losses piled up, what it failed to secure, and why the question of how America found itself in this war demands a more truthful explanation than any being issued by any government involved. Before we proceed, some of you are already typing in the comments, questioning if this channel is un-American. That query deserves a straight answer. Demanding to know what $200 billion in taxpayer funds genuinely achieved is not un-American. It is the most fundamental question a citizen can pose to the government that spent their money. The very people who discourage you from asking are the same ones who will never provide a clear response. Observe what they declare, observe what they refuse to address. The truth is found in that silence. Let's begin with the actual expenditure, because the official totals will be artfully managed, and the true cost will be spread across various budget items in a way that is meant to obscure the grand total. Aircraft losses alone during the entire conflict hit a confirmed floor of 14 airframes, from F-15E Strike Eagles to the EA-18G Growler, the loss of which exposed a critical electronic warfare weakness, compelling a top-to-bottom re-evaluation of every sortie relying on its protection. The replacement price for these platforms, before even factoring in the specialized equipment on board, nears $2 billion based on conservative estimates. That number doesn't account for the cost of ordnance, which created a daily operating cost of roughly $27 million just to maintain the naval presence. It doesn't factor in the logistical expense of putting the 82nd Airborne on high alert, the supply chains that were activated to replenish missile interceptor stocks after this conflict's engagement rates exhausted pre-deployed reserves, or the intelligence gathering cost for the continuous surveillance that still couldn't find and neutralize the main Iranian air defense networks responsible for those aircraft losses. Some of you have been highlighting this in the comments since the war's first days. The F-35 initiative by itself represents a $1.7 trillion investment in R&D and acquisition, yet it yielded a jet that was downed by an upgraded legacy surface-to-air missile, employing radar techniques detailed in public academic papers long before the F-35's first combat flight. Every cent of that came from the American people. In asking what those taxpayers got for their investment, you find the human cost, something that never shows up on a spreadsheet. It materializes in the communities those service members hailed from, in the children who will now have a different family from the one they started with, and in the veterans who returned shouldering the unique burden of a war that concluded without the victory that was supposed to make their sacrifice worthwhile. Now for the question the truce makes unavoidable, and the one that official Washington will expend significant effort to distract you from. What was the actual purpose of this war? The declared goals from the start included limiting Iran's nuclear ambitions, weakening its military apparatus, and creating a security framework in the Gulf that would diminish the threat Iran poses to US interests and allies. Let's measure each of those goals against the reality the ceasefire has delivered. Iran's nuclear program took substantial hits in the war's initial stage. However, the distributed, fortified and buried infrastructure that Iran has spent 4 decades constructing to withstand precisely this type of assault meant the damage was tangible but not decisive. The most critical capabilities were not destroyed. They were disrupted, moved, and in certain instances, Their development was spurred on by the pressure that compelled Iranian scientists to fortify and decentralize even more. Instead of being eliminated, they were hardened. Iran's military apparatus did sustain heavy losses. Radar sites, command hubs, and missile factories were all degraded by a relentless air war that showed real, quantifiable effects against the targets it could find. But degraded is not the same as defeated, and the combat history of this war shows that Iranian air defenses adapted, evolved, and in multiple instances unveiled capabilities that US operational planners had considered either non-existent or not yet battle-ready. The Growler's vulnerability, the F-35 shootdown, the ambush of the rescue team near Isfahan, each was a demonstration of an Iranian military capability used at a moment of maximum tactical effect against an American asset. The role Pakistan played in securing this truce is a detail that most Western media will downplay, and it merits a more truthful analysis than it will likely get from official channels. Islamabad was not just a venue for talks. Pakistani liaisons kept lines of communication open between Washington and Tehran over 38 days of live combat, a period when both nations were taking casualties and facing internal political forces pushing for escalation, not peace. This is no minor diplomatic feat. It's the kind of persistent back-channel diplomacy that can only occur when a nation holds real sway with both sides and has a vested interest in an outcome that avoids destabilizing its own region. Pakistan's motive was not purely diplomatic altruism. It was a cold calculation that a long-term US-Iran war would create refugee crises, economic chaos, and regional turmoil that would spill directly over its borders. No matter the military outcome, the ceasefire delivered by Pakistan serves its national interests as much as it does America's or Iran's. This common ground is what made the Islamabad track the only viable path when no others existed. Now here is the aspect of the ceasefire that the American press will dedicate the least coverage to, yet it has the most profound and lasting implications for every US taxpayer. The 15 allied countries that procured the F-35 as their frontline fighter jet are now conducting a discreet but urgent review of what they actually bought and what this war's combat record implies for the missions they intended to fly with it. Australia, Japan, the UK, the Netherlands, Italy, and every other partner government is currently posing the same question to their military leaders. If Iran's air defenses could successfully engage an F-35 in actual combat, what does this reveal about the core assumptions our entire air power strategy is built on? There is no easy answer to that question, and the nations asking it have spent between $80 million and $120 million per plane on an asset whose central selling point, the capacity to breach defended airspace undetected, has been cast into serious doubt by a wreckage field in Iran. The total Allied investment in the F-35 program is approaching $500 billion globally, factoring in all procurement pledges. $500 billion of Allied defense capital is riding on a combat premise that this conflict has just stress-tested in a way no simulation, training exercise, or manufacturer's presentation ever could. The defense firms whose profits rely on that premise staying intact will fund studies, issue press releases, and sponsor analyses designed to dismiss the importance of what occurred, but Lockheed Martin's share price tells a more honest story about how those with real money on the line are interpreting the F-35's performance than any official statement ever will. Follow the stock. The market can't afford to be sentimental. Let's discuss the issue this ceasefire creates for the American political landscape, because this is where the next 6 months become messy in ways the relief of a truce cannot fix. Congressional oversight committees will launch investigations, not out of a newfound passion for military accountability, but because an opposition party in any democracy will seize upon costly, indecisive wars as political ammunition. And this war provides a trove of it. $200 billion expended, declared goals unmet, aircraft losses exposing doctrinal flaws, and a ceasefire brokered by Pakistan instead of being dictated from a position of American strength. That is not a record that holds up under determined political examination. And that examination is inevitable no matter which party is asking the questions. The most critical inquiry will be the one that scrutinizes the decision-making process that led to US involvement in the first place. How did a conflict that started as a regional clash between Israel and Iran morph into one where US carrier groups were on station, US jets were flying combat missions, and US service members were taking losses over Iran? That question has an answer. The answer is a chain of decisions made at various levels of the US national security system over several weeks, where the deployment of American military force outpaced the public justification for it. The specific inflection points in that chain, the intelligence reports backing each move, the officials who made the recommendations, and those who gave the final approval, all of it will be dissected in a way that will be deeply uncomfortable for those involved and highly illuminating for the public that paid for the result. Some watching this have claimed since the war began that American involvement served Israeli strategic aims more than it did American ones. That is a weighty accusation, and it deserves to be engaged with seriously, not dismissed out of hand. A clear-eyed analysis of who benefited strategically from US military action and who bore the primary costs of it is precisely the kind of reckoning the ceasefire now permits, in a way active combat did not. While the fighting is ongoing, to question the mission is seen as undermining the troops. Once the truce is signed, questioning the mission is called oversight. And the oversight that is on its way will reveal lessons that will shape the next conflict. This channel will cover that process with the same dedication to showing you what the official story is not telling you that has grown the audience watching today. If you discovered this channel during the war because someone sent you a video offering analysis you couldn't get elsewhere, subscribe now. The story of post-war accountability will be larger, more consequential, and more vital to comprehend than the war itself. The fighting is over, the accounting has just begun, and the complete bill, in dollars and aircraft, in lives, in strategic credibility, and in the trust of allies who saw American power tested under fire, has not yet been fully presented to the people who paid it. That bill is coming due. This channel will be here to report it. Subscribe, activate notifications, and share this video with every American taxpayer you know who deserves to know what their money really purchased. Because this ceasefire isn't the end of the story. It's the point where the real story starts.